Just a little something to celebrate you, Dad. My son-in-law, Mark, said, his voice slick with a manufactured warmth that always made the hairs on my arm stand up. He handed me a heavy crystal tumbler, a generous pour of my favorite 18-year-old single malt scotch, glowing amber within it. The party swirled around us, a loud, festive monument to my retirement. After 45 years of building a construction empire from dust and grit, I was finally hanging up my hard hat. Everyone I loved, or thought I loved, was here. My daughter, Sarah, stood by her husband's side, a fragile, beautiful smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked nervous. I took the glass, my fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Mark." Very thoughtful. My eyes met his over the rim of the tumbler. He was all polished charm and expensive tailoring, a man who had never known a day of real labor in his life. He saw me as a relic, a doddering old fool whose time was over, an ATM with a fading pulse. He thought I hadn't noticed his greedy eyes cataloging the value of my home, his casual questions about my portfolio, his condescending tone when explaining modern finance, as if to a child. He thought I was blind, but I have always been a man who notices details. It's how you build skyscrapers that don't fall down. You check every rivet, every joint, every single detail. As he turned to say something to Sarah, his back momentarily to me, I glanced at the large, polished silver serving tray a waiter had just set down on the table beside us. Its mirror-like surface gave me a perfect, distorted view of the scene behind me. I watched Mark's hand, the one not holding his own drink, dip into his jacket pocket. I saw the quick, furtive movement as he palmed a small, white object. He glanced around. Seeing no one watching, he leaned slightly over my shoulder, as if to get a better look at someone across the room. His hand hovered over my glass for a fraction of a second. A tiny white pill dropped silently into the amber liquid, disappearing with a barely perceptible fizz. A malicious little smile played on his lips as he straightened up, convinced of his own cleverness. He had just tried to drug his father-in-law at his own retirement party. He thought it was the beginning of his victory. He was wrong. It was the beginning of his end. He made one fatal mistake. He assumed the old lion had no teeth left. I was about to show him how sharp they still were. My heart, which should have been breaking, instead turned to ice. The hurt was there, a deep, cold stone in my gut, but on the surface, a lifetime of strategic thinking took over. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I let a slow, slightly befuddled smile spread across my face. I would give him the doddering old fool he wanted to see. "Oh, my goodness, is that Bob Henderson over there?" I exclaimed, pointing with the hand holding the glass, deliberately sloshing it a little. "I haven't seen him in ages." I turned my body, creating a moment of chaos. Mark and Sarah both turned to look. In that split second, my left hand, which had been resting near Mark's own untouched glass on the table, moved with a speed that would have shocked him. A lifetime of practice, of palming tools and blueprints, made the motion fluid and imperceptible. I picked up his glass and, in the same movement, set mine down in its place. When they turned back, I was holding his drink, and my drugged one sat innocently on the table, right where his had been. "Sorry about that." I chuckled, playing the part of the clumsy old man. Nearly spilled this excellent scotch. Mark's eyes flickered to the glass in my hand, then to the one on the table. He saw nothing amiss. His arrogance was a blindfold. "No problem, Dad," he said, his smile widening, thinking his plan was back on track. "Just be careful." Oh, I would be. I raised the glass he now thought was mine. "To retirement," I said, my voice steady. He picked up his glass, my glass, from the table. "To new beginnings," he replied, a predatory gleam in his eye. We clinked our tumblers together. He took a deep, satisfying swallow. I merely wet my lips. The game had begun. To understand the cold precision of my response, you have to understand the depth of the betrayal. You have to understand Sarah. She was my world, the only child my beloved Eleanor and I were Ableto have. Eleanor was gone now, taken by cancer a decade ago, and in her absence, my devotion to Sarah had only intensified. I had built Miller Construction from a single pickup truck and a set of second-hand tools into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that reshaped the city's skyline. I did it for them. For Eleanor's security, for Sarah's future. I worked 18-hour days, my hands raw and my back aching, so that Sarah would never have to know that kind of struggle. She went to the best private schools, wore the best clothes, drove a brand new car the day she turned 16. I paid for her Ivy League education. Not because she was a brilliant student, she was average, coasting on charm, but because I wanted her to have every possible advantage. When she met Mark in her senior year, I had my reservations. He was too smooth, too polished. He came from money, but it was old, diluted money, the kind that teaches entitlement, but not the work ethic to sustain it. He was a junior investment banker with a middling salary, but the tastes of a tycoon. But Sarah was smitten. She saw him as sophisticated and worldly. I saw him as a peacock, all flash and no substance. Against my better judgment, I embraced him for her sake. When they wanted to marry, I threw them a wedding that was the talk of the town. When they wanted a house, I didn't just help with the down payment. I gave them a gift of $300,000 cash so they could afford a home in a neighborhood far beyond their means. I co-signed a mortgage to secure them a better rate, tie my own financial health to theirs out of love for my daughter. I saw it as an investment in her happiness. It was a foolish, sentimental calculation. Love, I've learned, can be the most blinding force on earth. After the wedding, Mark's attitude began to shift. The polite deference he'd shown me slowly curdled into a kind of patronizing impatience. He'd advise me on my company, suggesting I take on more debt to finance risky ventures. You have to spend money to make money, Arthur, he'd say, calling me by my first name in a way that felt like a deliberate erosion of my authority. I'd just smile and say, I've done all right with my methods so far, son. The questions about my estate started subtly. You must have a great estate planner, Arthur. It's so important to protect your assets for. You know, the next generation, being him and Sarah, of course. Then the suggestions became more direct. Over a family dinner one Sunday, he slid a brochure for a trust management service across the table. We were thinking, he said, gesturing between himself and Sarah, who looked down at her plate, that it might be time to get your affairs in order. It would be so much easier for Sarah if she had power of attorney, just to help you with the bills and things. Now that you're getting older, I was 64 at the time, running a massive company, and could mentally calculate the load-bearing capacity of a steel beam faster than he could calculate a tip. I think I can manage my own bills for a while longer, Mark, I'd said, my voice colder than I intended. Sarah shot me a look, a flash of irritation. He's just trying to help Daddy, she chided. That was when I first felt the real sting. It wasn't just Mark. He was poisoning my daughter against me. He was framing my competence as senility, my independence as stubbornness. And she was buying it. The moment that shattered my remaining illusions came about 6 months before the retirement party. I'd stopped by their house unannounced to drop off a birthday gift for Sarah. I used the key she'd given me, letting myself in quietly, not wanting to disturb them if they were busy. I heard their voices coming from the kitchen, sharp and tense. I froze in the hallway, my hand still on the doorknob. He's just sitting on it, Sarah. Mark's voice was a low, vicious hiss. Medial. And for what? So he can play with his construction toys for a few more years? He's old. It's our time. It should be our money. I felt the air leave my lungs. Mark, don't talk like that. Sarah's voice was weak, a token protest. He's my father. He's a dragon sitting on a hoard of gold. Mark shot back. I have opportunities, big ones, that I have to pass up because I'm cash poor. We're living off my salary and his handouts like children. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? He needs to retire. He needs to sign things over. If he won't do it willingly, then we'll have to find a way to. Encourage him how? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. What does that even mean? There was a pause. I could picture Mark's cruel smile. Let me worry about that, he said softly. Just be on my side when the time comes. Remember what we stand to gain. Our entire future. I backed out of the house as silently as I had entered. I sat in my car for a long time, the wrapped gift on the passenger seat feeling like a mockery. The man my daughter married was actively plotting to steal from me. and my daughter, my only child, was, at best, a willing accomplice. The pain of that realization was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. But beneath the pain, something else was kindling. A cold, hard anger. The kind I hadn't felt since I was a young man fighting for my company's survival. Mark wanted a war. He was about to get one. So, when I saw him drop that pill into my glass, I wasn't just hurt. I was ready. I watched him drink the drug scotch, a long, thirsty gulp. I kept up the charade, mingling, accepting congratulations, my eyes constantly tracking him. It took about 20 minutes. I was talking to my COO, Frank, a man who'd been with me for 30 years and was more of a son to me than Mark could ever be when I saw it. Mark, who had been holding court with some of Sarah's friends, paused mid-sentence. He blinked slowly, a confused look on his face. He shook his head slightly, as if to clear it. Sarah touched his arm. "Are you okay, honey?" He waved her off. "Fine, just a little warm in here." A few minutes later, he was leaning against a wall, his tie loosened. His speech, when he tried to join another conversation, was slightly slurred. He excused himself, heading towards a restroom, but he weaved slightly, bumping into a table. Now the concern on Sarah's face was genuine. She had no idea what was happening. She probably thought he'd just had too much to drink. She followed him, and they had a hushed, frantic conversation in the hall. I saw her put a hand to his forehead. They returned a moment later, their coats on. "Dad, I'm so sorry," Sarah said, her face pale with worry. "Mark isn't feeling well. I think he's coming down with something." "We have to go." Mark stood behind her, swaying slightly, his face a mask of confusion and frustration. He couldn't understand why he felt like he was about to pass out. The irony was a bitter, satisfying pill of my own. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice dripping with paternal concern. "You get him home. I hope you feel better." "Mark," he just grunted, unable to form a coherent sentence. As I watched them leave, my arm around Sarah's shoulder as I walked them to the door, I felt a grim sense of finality. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. He had tried to incapacitate me, to render me helpless, likely to get me to sign some document or to make me seem medically incompetent. He had declared war. Now, I would dictate the terms of his surrender. The next morning, I didn't go to the golf course. I went to my office. My real office, the one in my home that no one but I ever entered. It was less a study and more a command center. For 40 years, it had been a nerve center of Miller Construction. Now, it would be the war room for the dismantling of Mark Peterson. My first call was to David Chun, my lawyer and my friend for over 4 decades. We'd come up together, he in law, I in construction. He was shrewd, ruthless, and utterly loyal. "David," I said, my voice flat, "we have a problem. It's Mark." I laid out everything. The conversation I'd overheard. The slow poisoning of my daughter's loyalty. The incident at the party. I told him I had retrieved the drugged glass after the caterers had cleared it, placing it carefully in a sealed bag. David was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was like flint. "The little parasite. Arthur, I told you he was no good." "I know, David. But sentiment got the better of me. That's over now. I want to protect my assets. All of them. And I want him to pay for what he's done." "Consider it done," David said. "First things first, the glass goes to a lab today. We'll get a full analysis. Second, we move your liquid assets." Immediately, over the next 48 hours, David and I worked with a quiet fury. We established a new, irrevocable trust. But it wasn't for Sarah. I love my daughter, but she had made her choice. She had stood by as her husband plotted against me. The beneficiary of this new, ironclad trust was the future issue of Sarah Peterson, my grandchildren, should she ever have any. The trust would be managed by a neutral third-party financial institution, with David as an overseer. Neither Sarah nor Mark could touch a single penny. They wouldn't even know it existed until it was too late. My portfolio of stocks and bonds, worth tens of millions, was transferred into that trust. It was now beyond Mark's reach forever. Next, the company. Miller Construction. I was officially retired, and my handpicked successor, Frank, was now CEO. Mark had been lobbying for a lucrative seat on the board, imagining he could influence Frank and skim from the company's vast cash flow. He underestimated Frank as much as he underestimated me. I called an emergency meeting with Frank and the two other board members, both old friends who had been with me from the early days. I told them the entire story. The shock in the room was followed by a cold, unified anger. "What do you need from us, Arthur?" Frank asked, his jaw tight. "First," I said, "Mark's nomination to the board is dead. Second, I want a full, discreet forensic audit of the 3 projects he consulted on last year. He billed us for logistical consulting. I want to know where every dollar went." "I have a feeling he's been practicing on a smaller scale," Frank nodded. "I'll get our top people on it. We'll find it if it's there." Lastly, I told them about Mark's attempt to drug me. I explained that I intended to pursue this legally, and it would get messy. I gave them an out. "This could bring negative press to the company. If you want to distance yourselves." Frank cut me off. "Arthur, this company is your family. We're your family. We're with you all the way." That loyalty, so absent in my own blood, was a balm to my wounded soul. The third pillar of my counteroffensive was information. David recommended a private investigator, a former police detective named Costello, who was relentless and discreet. "I want to know everything about Mark Peterson," I told him when we met in a quiet coffee shop. "His finances, his habits, his friends, his enemies. Everything." Costello just nodded, his eyes missing nothing. "You'll have it." The preliminary report came a week later, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Mark wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. He had leveraged his portfolio to the hilt, making a series of disastrously risky bets on volatile stocks. He was in debt up to his eyeballs, owing money not just to banks but to some very unsavory private lenders. And the reason for his desperation wasn't just bad investments. Costello's report came with a file of photographs. Photos of Mark with another woman, a colleague from his firm. Intimate dinners, a weekend trip to a boutique hotel, a kiss in the front seat of his car. He wasn't just cheating on my daughter. He was funding a whole separate life with money he didn't have. He wasn't just trying to secure their future, as he told Sarah. He was trying to pay off his past and fund his lies. The lab report on the glass came back the same day. The pill contained a potent, fast-acting sedative. At the dosage found, it would have rendered a man my age and size unconscious within 30 minutes. It could have easily caused respiratory distress or a dangerous fall. It was not a prank. It was a calculated, malicious act. The final piece was the house. Their beautiful, overpriced house. My $300,000 gift and my signature on the mortgage. I had David pull the contract. Tucked away in the fine print was a clause he had insisted on, one I had forgotten about. The cosigner liability clause. It stated that if one party's actions, such as fraud or other criminal conduct, put the cosigner's financial standing at risk, the cosigner had the right to declare the loan in default and demand immediate repayment from the primary borrower. Mark's impending fraud charges from the Miller construction audit would be more than enough to trigger it. The trap was now fully built. All the pieces were in place. All I needed was for the rat to walk into it. I let 2 weeks pass. I played my part beautifully. I called Sarah a few times, asking after Mark. "Oh, he's much better," she'd say, her voice still strained. "Just a nasty 24-hour bug." I'd make my voice sound a little frail, a little lost. "Oh, this retirement is so confusing. All this paperwork, and the market is so complicated. I was thinking of selling off some of my old stock, but I wouldn't know the first thing about where to put the money." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the echo of Mark's poisonous words. "Well, you know Mark is brilliant with that stuff, Daddy," she offered, just as I knew she would. "You should talk to him." "Oh, do you think he'd have the time? He's such a busy, important man." I laid the flattery on thick. "Of course he would. He'd be happy to help. I'll have him call you." The call came less than an hour later. Mark's voice was back to its confident, condescending best. He'd clearly recovered from his illness and had no clue as to its true cause. "Sarah tells me you're looking to make some moves with your portfolio." "Arthur," he said, "I've actually got a fantastic, can't-miss opportunity I've been looking into. A new tech startup. Ground floor. It's going to be huge. We should discuss it." "That sounds wonderful, Mark," I said, my voice full of feeble gratitude. "Why don't you and Sarah come over for dinner?" "My treat. Even better," he countered smoothly. "Why don't you come to our place?" Friday night. Let Sarah cook for you. We'll make it a real family evening. We can go over the prospectus, then perfect. He wanted the confrontation on his home turf, in the house I paid for, where he felt powerful. He was walking right into the center of the web. "I'd like that very much, Mark," I said. Friday it is. When I arrived at their house on Friday evening, the scene was set for a victory celebration. Mark's victory, he thought. He greeted me at the door with a confident clap on the shoulder, steering me into the living room where a bottle of expensive champagne was chilling. "To new ventures, Arthur," he declared, pouring 3 glasses. Sarah, in the background, was putting the finishing touches on dinner. She looked stressed, a line of tension between her brows, but she was playing her part, smiling and asking about my week. She was a pawn in his game, and my heart ached for the lesson she was about to learn. We sat down to dinner. The food was delicious, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. I ate sparingly, pushing the food around my plate, watching them. Mark did most of the talking, a long, self-congratulatory monologue about his financial acumen, the foolishness of old-school investors, and the genius of the tech world. He treated me like a child who needed to be convinced to eat his vegetables. Finally, after the plates were cleared, came the moment he'd been waiting for. "Well, Arthur," he said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers, the picture of a master of the universe. "Let's talk business." He slid a glossy, professionally bound prospectus across the polished dining table. "This is Innovatech. They're developing a new AI-driven logistics platform. It's revolutionary. I've personally vetted it. The buy-in for the second round of funding is $2 million. For you, that's a drop in the bucket. The projections show a 10-fold return in 18 months. I picked up the prospectus. I didn't open it. I just held it, feeling its weight. I let the silence stretch out, enjoying the smug, expectant look on his face. Sarah watched me, chewing on her lower lip. $2 million, I said softly. "That's a lot of money. It's an investment in your family's future," Mark said smoothly. "Our future?" I looked from him to Sarah, then back again. I placed the prospectus down gently on the table. "That's an interesting proposal, Mark." I began, my voice changing. The manufactured frailty was gone, replaced by the quiet, hard authority I had used to command boardrooms for 40 years. "But before we talk about my money, let's talk about yours." Mark's smile faltered. He blinked. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a clear, sealed evidence bag. Inside was the crystal tumbler from my party. I placed it on the table next to the prospectus. "I believe this was your glass," I said calmly. "Or rather, it was supposed to be mine. It's an 18-year-old single malt, with a little something extra. A powerful sedative, to be precise." The lab report was quite thorough. The color drained from Mark's face. He looked as if I had just struck him. He stared at the glass, then at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Daddy." "What?" "I don't understand." "Oh, I think you do, Sarah," I said, my voice sad but firm. "You stood by while your husband plotted to encourage me to give up my money. Well, this was his encouragement. He tried to drug me in my own party, hoping to make me seem incompetent or get me to sign something while I was incapacitated." I turned my full attention back to Mark, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. "You're not just a cheat, Mark. You are a criminal." Before he could respond, I continued, my voice methodical and relentless. "Let's move on to the company. Miller Construction. Your nomination to the board has been permanently withdrawn. Furthermore, the forensic audit I commissioned into your consulting work has been completed. It turns out you've been billing the company for Go services and kicking back funds through a shell corporation. It's called FRA, Mark. My CEO, Frank, is meeting with the district attorney on Monday morning. I believe an arrest warrant will follow shortly." Sarah let out a strangled sob. "No." Mark shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're lying. You old fool. You can't prove anything." "Sit down," I commanded, my voice like steel. To my surprise, he did. The bully was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. I reached into my jacket again and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I slid it across the table, not to him, but to Sarah. "I also hired a private investigator, Sweetheart. I'm sorry you have to see this, But you need to know who you married. She opened the flap with trembling fingers and pulled out the photographs. The pictures of Mark with the other woman. Her face, already pale, crumpled completely. A low, wounded sound escaped her lips as the photos slipped from her fingers and scattered across the table. Mark stared at them, his last shred of composure vanishing. "You bastard," he whispered, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "I'm not finished," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "As for my assets, the ones you were so eager to manage, they're no longer mine to control." 2 days after the party, I moved my entire liquid portfolio into a new, irrevocable trust. "It is for your children, Sarah, if you ever have them. You and your husband will never see a dime of it. You are completely cut off." Finally, I delivered the killing blow. I looked around the beautiful dining room, the symbol of their stolen prosperity. "This house," I said quietly, "it's a lovely home, but it's not yours anymore. The mortgage contract you both signed had a co-signer liability clause. Given that you, Mark, are about to be indicted for felony fraud against my company, you have put your co-signer, me, at significant financial risk. I spoke to the bank yesterday. I have exercised my right to call the loan. You have 30 days to repay the full outstanding balance of $12 million. If you cannot, and I know you cannot, the bank will foreclose. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. It was all laid bare. Every lie, every betrayal, every secret." The room was silent save for Sarah's ragged sobs. Mark stared at me, his face a maelstrom of shock, hatred, and utter defeat. The arrogant, condescending man was gone, stripped bare to reveal the pathetic, desperate fraud beneath. "You thought I was a weak old man," I said, my voice low and final. "An obstacle to be removed. You disrespected my love, my sacrifices, and the memory of my wife. You tried to take everything I built. Instead, I have taken everything from you. You have nothing. No money, no job, no house, and no wife. This is the future you've earned for yourself." I stood up from the table, my own dinner untouched. I looked at my daughter, her face buried in her hands, her world shattered. The satisfaction of my victory was tainted with a profound sadness. I had won the war, but the cost was my family. I walked out of the house, leaving them in the ruins of the life they had tried to steal, and didn't look back. The aftermath was as swift and brutal as I'd planned. Mark was arrested 2 days later, walking out of his office in handcuffs. The fraud charges from Miller Construction were just the beginning. Once his other creditors heard, they descended like vultures. He was facing multiple lawsuits and a lengthy prison sentence. His affair became public, and he was fired from his job in disgrace. Sarah, as I expected, left him. She moved into a small, furnished apartment, her designer clothes and expensive jewelry sold off to pay for a lawyer and basic living expenses. About a month after that terrible dinner, she called me. Her voice was small, broken. "Can I see you, Daddy?" she asked. I agreed to meet her at a neutral place, a quiet park halfway between our homes. She looked terrible. She was thin, with dark circles under her eyes. The entitled princess was gone, replaced by a woman who looked like she had seen the world for what it truly was for the first time. We sat on a bench in silence for a long time. "I'm so sorry," she finally whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was weak, and I was greedy. I listened to him. I let him turn me against you. I knew it was wrong. Deep down, I knew it, but I did nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me." I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her. I saw the child I had raised, but I also saw the woman who had made a terrible mistake. The vengeful fire in my heart had cooled, leaving behind only a sad, hollow ache. "Forgiveness is a complicated thing, Sarah," I told her, my voice gentle. "And trust is even more so. You didn't just hurt me, you betrayed the memory of your mother. You betrayed the very foundation of our family." "I know," she sobbed. "What can I do? I'll do anything." "It's not about doing anything for me," I said. "It's about what you do for yourself. For the first time in your life, you are on your own. You have no husband, no trust fund, no one to smooth the way for you. You have to find out who you are without all of that. Get a job, a real one. Support yourself. Go to therapy and understand why you made the choices you did. Rebuild your life, not on a foundation of someone else's money, but on your own strength. It was a hard message, the hardest I'd ever had to deliver to her. But it was also the greatest gift I could give her now. A chance at redemption. A chance to become the woman Eleanor and I had always hoped she would be. She nodded, wiping her tears. Okay, Daddy, she said. Okay. The road ahead for her would be long and difficult, and our relationship would never be what it once was. But as I watched her walk away that day, there was a flicker of something new in her eyes, determination. As for me, I settled into my retirement. I traveled. I spent time with old friends. I oversaw my charitable foundation, ensuring the money I had earned would do some good in the world. Sometimes late at night, I sit in my study, a glass of 18-year-old scotch in my hand, an untainted one, and I look at the photos of Eleanor and a young, smiling Sarah. I feel a pang of loss for the family that was shattered, but I also feel a quiet sense of peace. I had protected my life's work. I had defended my honor. And in the face of the ultimate betrayal, I had not broken. I had endured. I had won. And perhaps, in the end, I had saved my daughter from a life of gilded emptiness, giving her the one thing my money could never buy, a chance to save herself.